I paid off the house, I showed up every holiday, but on Thanksgiving, my mom invited everyone except me. So I showed up anyway, and I said one sentence that ended it all. I showed up with a tray of her favorite peach cobbler. I made it from scratch. Took me 4 hours and a second-degree burn on my left wrist. The roads were icy, my heater wasn't working, but I came anyway, because I thought maybe this year she'd remember I exist. I stood at the door for almost 5 minutes. I could see them through the window, laughing, plates clinking, that yellow glow of her chandelier, spilling onto a table set for at least 20 people. My aunt was there, my cousin with the baby, her new boyfriend, even her dog had a seat. But not me, not the daughter who spent 3 summers working double shifts to help pay off the last bit of her medical bills. Not the daughter who skipped her own graduation to take care of her during chemo. Not the one who sent $8,000 last Christmas when she said the pipes burst and no one else could help. I knocked. Nobody answered. I knocked again. This time a little louder, a little more desperate. I didn't want to make a scene. I just wanted to be let in. After a minute, my younger brother opened the door. He looked confused, like seeing me was unexpected. He said, "Mom thought you were working." I wasn't. She knew I took the week off. I sent her the text 2 weeks ago. She liked it, reacted with a heart. I walked in anyway. My boots were soaked, and the foil on the cobbler had started to crumple from the steam. I held it out to him. He didn't take it. I followed the laughter into the dining room. She looked up, saw me, and said, "Oh, I didn't know you were coming." Her voice was flat. No smile, no hug, just a fork halfway to her mouth and a glass of red wine in her other hand. I stood at the edge of the room like a stranger who'd walked into the wrong house. She turned to my sister and whispered something. They both laughed. I stayed standing. No one moved a chair. No one said, "Sit down." No one even looked me in the eye for more than a second. So I walked to the kitchen and set the cobbler on the counter. I heard someone say, "Oh my God, she brought food." There was a pause, then more laughter. I stood there in silence, my fingers still sticky with syrup, my stomach hollow, my chest tight. They started singing happy birthday to my cousin's kid. I wasn't invited to her birth or her christening. I sent a handmade quilt in the mail. I got a text from my aunt saying, "Thanks, I guess." I stood behind the half wall and watched them cut cake. They passed pieces to everyone, even the dog. I didn't get one. I checked my phone, no new messages. Just my own text from earlier that morning. "Can't wait to see everyone. Let me know if I should bring anything." No reply, not even a K. I stepped back into the dining room, tried to say something, anything. But my mom just looked at me and said, "You could have at least called first." She said it like I'd ruined her night. Like I'd committed some kind of crime by showing up to my own family's dinner. I nodded, took one last look at the table, and walked toward the door. My sister muttered, "She always makes it about her." I stopped, turned around, looked at her, at all of them. But I didn't say a word, not a single word. I just smiled and walked out. It was still snowing, harder now. My windshield was iced over, and my fingertips were numb before I reached the car. I sat there for a minute, hands shaking on the wheel, staring at the house where I used to live. Where I used to matter. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just drove away. There was one message on my phone by the time I got home, from my mom. "Next time, don't come uninvited." That was it. No love you, no apology, just that. I left the cobbler on their counter. I don't know if they ate it. And I didn't care. Because that night, sitting in my empty apartment with no lights on, I realized something. I wasn't their family anymore. And maybe I never was. They always said I was too sensitive, that I took things too personally. But I was the one who held my mom's hair while she vomited from chemo. I was the one who stayed up all night researching treatment options. I was the one who canceled my scholarship to stay close and help, and all it got me was a locked door, a cold dinner, and a family who laughed when I left. They made their choice. And now, so did I. I didn't text back. I didn't answer her follow-up voicemail either, the one that said, "You embarrassed us." It wasn't the time or place. There was never a time or place for me, apparently. That winter, I stopped reaching out. I didn't call for New Year's. I didn't send a Valentine's card like I usually did. No flowers on my mom's birthday. I didn't even open the group chat, the one they kept me in, but never spoke to me in, the one where I was just a ghost with a profile picture. I started working double shifts again. Not because I had to, because I needed something to fill the space where they used to be. Then one night, in early March, I got an email. It was from the university I'd deferred 6 years ago, the one I'd given up when my mom got sick. They still had my record, still had my essay, still had my letter of acceptance. They said, "You're eligible to reapply." I stared at the screen for 10 minutes. Then I clicked apply. I didn't tell anyone. No announcement, no guess what. Just me, alone in my apartment, filling out the application at 2:43 a.m. with a cup of cold tea and a frozen pizza in the oven. 3 weeks later, I got the acceptance letter. Full ride, scholarship. They said my original essay still carried weight, that my work history showed unusual strength, that my persistence was impressive. I didn't forward the email to anyone. I just saved it, printed it out, taped it to the inside of my closet. The silence from my family didn't change. They posted pictures of dinners, parties, vacations. My name was never mentioned. Once I saw my mom tag my sister and write, "My only rock, my everything." I didn't react. I just closed the app and went back to studying. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who didn't ask me about my sister's success or my mother's health. They asked me about my thesis, my ideas, my future. And I realized I never needed their approval. I only thought I did. By spring, I had a paid internship at a nonprofit. By fall, I was co-authoring a study with my professor. She called me a silent powerhouse. I liked that. Still, I didn't tell my mom. Not when I got the internship. Not when I got published. Not when my article went viral in a major academic journal and got picked up by 2 national outlets. I didn't say a word. They didn't ask. One day in November, almost a year after that dinner, I got a message. Not from my mom. From my aunt. She said, "Your mom's throwing another Thanksgiving dinner. I assume you're busy?" There was no invitation, just dismissal. I typed back, "I have plans?" She replied with a thumbs up. The day of the dinner, I worked a full shift at the nonprofit. I skipped breakfast, spilled coffee on my only clean shirt, got caught in the rain. I was exhausted. But then I opened my inbox, and there it was, an offer from one of the most prestigious graduate programs in the country. They wanted me, fully funded, research assistantship, priority housing, a stipend. The subject line just said, "Welcome." I stared at it, then I laughed, not because it was funny, because it didn't feel real. The girl they forgot to invite, the girl they left at the door, the girl who brought cobbler and was told she embarrassed them. She was going Ivy League. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just sat there in my rain-soaked shirt, holding that email like it was a secret weapon. That night, I drove past my mother's house. They were inside, lights on, same chandelier, same table, same laughter. I parked down the block, and I waited until the food was served, until the wine started flowing, until someone took the annual group photo they always posted. Then I got out of the car, walked to the door, rang the bell. My cousin opened it this time. She looked surprised. I said, "Hi." She blinked. "They didn't know you were coming." I nodded. "They never do." I stepped inside. The conversation stopped. Forks froze mid-air. My mother stood at the head of the table with a carving knife. She said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Don't worry, I won't stay." I walked to the center of the room, pulled the acceptance letter from my bag, held it up. "This," I said, "is where I've been." I placed the letter on the table, right next to the centerpiece she'd probably spent $200 on. No one said a word. I turned to leave, but before I reached the door, my sister called out, "Why now? Why show up like this?" I looked at her, and I said, "Because I finally have something to be proud of, and none of you earned it." Then I walked out, didn't wait for applause, Didn't wait for the guilt or the fake congratulations. I left them sitting at that table, same as last year, but this time, it was different. This time, I was walking away with something. Something they couldn't take, something they couldn't mock. I didn't check my phone that night, didn't wait for messages. I already had what I needed. And the best part was, they still had no idea how much more was coming. The next morning, I had 10 missed calls. 2 from my mom, 4 from my sister. The rest were numbers I didn't save anymore. No voicemails, no apologies. Just silence wrapped in curiosity. They didn't care that I had made it. They just didn't like how I told them. That week, I blocked all their numbers. Not out of anger, just necessity. Because I was done being background noise in their story. I was writing my own now. Campus was different. Quiet. Snow covering the old stone buildings like a blanket. I walked to class alone, always early. My professors started noticing, asking me to stay after. "You're always prepared," they said. "Reliable, sharp." I didn't say much, just nodded. That was enough. By midterms, I had a job offer lined up. Consulting, government research, 6 figures. I hadn't even finished my first semester. I forwarded the offer to my academic advisor. She replied in under 10 minutes, "They noticed what your family didn't." I didn't forward it to anyone else. Around that time, my cousin sent me a DM. She said, "Grandma asked about you. Mom said you've been distant. Just thought I'd check in." I typed, "Hope you're well." Then deleted it. Typed again, "I'm fine." Then deleted that too. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. They had their version of me, quiet, invisible, convenient to forget. And I had outgrown all of it. Then in April, something strange happened. I got a package, no return address. Inside was a photo album, old from when I was 5, covered in cheap plastic and peeling stickers. The first picture was me and my mom at the zoo. I had cotton candy all over my face. The second picture was missing, just torn out. On the last page was a sticky note, handwritten, slanted letters I hadn't seen in over a year. It said, "I thought you might still care." I stared at that page for a long time. Then I closed it and put it back in the box. I didn't know what she wanted from me anymore. Love, forgiveness, nostalgia. None of those things meant what they used to. Because by then, I'd been published again. My research was trending on academic blogs. I was invited to a national conference. People called me by my full name. Professors introduced me like I mattered. And slowly, I started to believe them. Then graduation came. I didn't invite anyone. I paid for the cap and gown myself. Sat in the middle row, crossed the stage alone. No one clapped. No one waved from the bleachers. And I liked it that way, because I didn't need anyone to see me win for it to count. That summer, I moved to DC, got a condo, signed a lease with my own name at the top, started working full-time, took the metro, learned how to iron dress shirts properly, and on one hot Tuesday in July, I got lunch across the street from my office. Same place I went every Tuesday, same soup, same window seat. But that day, someone tapped my shoulder. I turned. It was my mother. She looked smaller, tired, older than I remembered. She said, "I've been looking for you." I said, "Why?" She didn't answer right away. Just pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot. It was an article, one of mine, titled, "Invisible Daughters, The Emotional Cost of Being Forgotten." She said, "I didn't know you felt this way." I sipped my soup. "I wrote it a year ago." She nodded. "I read it last week." I didn't say anything. She sat down across from me without asking, started crying, right there, in the middle of the lunch rush. People stared. I didn't. She said, "I didn't know how to be a mother to you." I said, "You didn't try." She covered her face, kept crying. I waited. Then she said, "I thought you were fine. I thought you didn't need much." I looked out the window, then said, "I stopped needing because it hurt to ask." She tried to reach across the table. I didn't move. She said, "Can we talk sometime?" I finished the last spoonful of soup, then stood up, looked down at her, and said, "We're already talking." I left without saying goodbye. Got back to the office, opened my laptop, finished a draft for my next piece. I titled it, "Healing Doesn't Require Permission." 2 months passed. She didn't reach out again. No calls, no visits, no emails pretending. Things could go back to normal, and honestly, I didn't expect her to. Because silence is what she taught me, and now I knew how to use it. My days got quieter in a different way. Not empty, just focused. I was in meetings now, real meetings, with directors, senators, people whose names were on plaques outside buildings. They shook my hand like it meant something. I gave a speech once, at a summit. I talked about resilience, about systems that fail people, and how most of us learn to survive without applause. There were 4 standing ovations. Someone came up to me after and said, "Your voice is calm, but it cuts like glass." I just nodded. Later that night, I sat in my condo with a glass of wine and no music playing, just quiet, and I thought about the last family dinner I ever attended. I could still see the chandelier, still hear them laughing after my mother said I wasn't her daughter, still remember how cold the cranberry sauce was, how fake the tablecloth looked under the good silverware. They thought I left quietly that night because I was hurt. But really, I left because I already knew I wasn't coming back, and nothing since had convinced me otherwise. Then, one afternoon in December, I got a card, no envelope, just a folded piece of stationery slipped into my building's mailbox. It said, "Dinner. 6 p.m. if you want." No name. But I knew the handwriting. Same crooked R's, same soft cursive she used. To write notes for my lunchbox, I left it on the counter. Didn't open it again, didn't mark the date. But when that day came, I knew. I don't know why I went. Maybe to prove I could. Maybe to see if anything had changed. Maybe just to confirm that it hadn't. I drove back to the same house, same street, same porch light she always left on. When she opened the door, she didn't smile, just said, "I didn't cook. I ordered Thai." I stepped inside. The table was small now. No centerpiece, no name cards, just 2 plates. I sat. We ate in silence. She didn't ask about my job or my life or the fact that I'd been on the cover of a policy magazine just last month. Instead, she said, "I think I was jealous of you." I looked at her. She said, "You never needed me, and I needed to be needed." I didn't respond because the truth was, I did need her. Once, years ago. When I was 17 and scared and losing sleep over whether she loved my sister more. When I was 21 and alone in a dorm room, wondering if I made a mistake by not staying home. When I was 25 and bringing cobbler to a family that didn't save me a seat. But now I didn't need anything. She reached across the table again. This time I let her. Her hand was cold. She said, "I want to be better." I said, "You could have started earlier." She nodded. We didn't finish the food. She offered to pack it up. I said no. She asked if she could call me sometime. I said, "Maybe." And that was the truth. Because I didn't hate her. I didn't love her either. What I felt was quieter than that. Like dust on a photo. Like warmth from a sweater you forgot you owned. When I left, she stood at the door and watched me walk to my car. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't say I love you. Didn't say anything at all. And that felt right. Back home, I sat on my couch and opened my laptop. Wrote one more line on the draft I had open. It said, "Sometimes the family you walk away from becomes the reason you walk forward." I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, looked around my apartment, clean, quiet, mine. Then I poured myself tea and smiled, not because anything had changed, but because I had, and that was enough.